Raw Talk.
Well, welcome to Raw Talk, and I'm so glad you tuned in. And I got to thinking, Zach, if somebody's tuning in,
that's dangerous.
If somebody's tuning in, they're really either really bored, or are they just desperate? Or
no. If they're tuning in, they've heard Zach Yates is on this show.
He's on his game,
and I got my Jordans on, and that means when I put on some Jordans,
it's too legit.
It's hey baby, it's game time. Game time.
I don't have any Jordans, but I got some straight up retro Nike Airs.
You do. Hey man, Air Force Ones, old school.
Man, my wife gives me fits about these things.
I love them shoes. Nice.
And I get more compliments on these things.
Retro.
So Zach, today's the first day of summer, and it's been.
Is it really?
Yeah, today's actually the first day of summer.
Dang.
And it's really been hot, so it's been letting us know that it was coming.
It's coming.
But what is your favorite thing about summer?
I hate summertime.
You don't like summertime?
No. If you're in the barber business and you're next to a college and that's 60% of your business.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't pay a lot of bills in the summertime. You use a lot of credit cards. So, but I do love going to the lake. I have a lake house, and man, we spend a lot of time up there with the fam. Get a lot of friends and everybody coming up. I always take off the 4th of July week.
Yeah.
That's my vacation week for the year, and spend the whole time up there with the family, cooking and just hanging out. So that is by far probably the best week of the year for me.
So you're a lake guy, huh?
I'm a lake guy. Yes, it's shady. You know, got pontoon, got a canopy. Beach for a pale white dude isn't fun, so I need shade.
It's funny you mentioned that because on my 40th birthday, my wife took me to the beach, and my feet, they got so sunburned that they swole up like big old watermelons.
Yeah.
And then I ended up having to go to the hospital and got sun poison and everything else, and it was miserable. They almost did surgery on me.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never been that sunburned, but if you see a guy at the lake on a jet ski with long pants, long shirt, and a hood and a hat and shoes, that's me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not getting sunburned.
So if I ever go back to the beach, I'm hanging out underneath the tent the whole time.
I have a rule. Me and Heather went to Colorado a few years ago and had such a good time. And we went in the summer, and I told Heather, you made a mistake. You took me somewhere where there's shade at 70 degrees. You know, we could hang out in the creeks and the lakes. I'll never go back to the beach. And that was 7 years ago, and I haven't been back to the beach.
Yeah.
And I'm not going back.
I enjoy it. I can give or take it. But my favorite thing about summertime, I don't really care for the heat that much. I like to stay indoors. But I like Mater sandwiches.
Do you?
Yeah.
I don't eat tomatoes.
Oh man, if it come out of somebody's garden, I'm on it.
I won't eat them.
So,
I don't like the texture, the slime in the middle of the tomato.
Man.
I can't stand that texture.
All I need is some Blue Plate mayonnaise, Maters, salt and pepper.
I'm done.
And that's it.
If it's on my hamburger, I won't. I can't. I just can't. I can eat it as long as it doesn't touch the bun. If it infects my bun, I can't eat it.
But I want to eat Mater. I want to eat Maters, or that's what my grandmother called Maters. I want to eat Maters if they come out of the grocery store or Walmart and like that. I gotta have like homegrown.
Okay.
So that's what I like. That's what I like about summer because
Yeah.
everybody's growing Maters this time of year.
Just giving them away.
Well, no, yeah,
yeah.
I got my. I make my rounds.
Everybody's like, "Hey, you want some tomatoes? I got tomatoes."
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll take them. My wife eats them.
Hey man, we went and hunted down a buffalo.
Joe the buffalo. We upgraded.
We were talking about the Dances with Wolves earlier, and like Tatanka.
Yeah.
So for those who are our age.
Yeah, you've seen that movie. You might know what that means.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're gonna do something very, very unique this week. We figured if we're gonna do a podcast with you and I in it, I think it would probably be good for our audience or following or whatever you want to call it to get to know both you and I.
Yeah, might be good.
So
when they know where we come from.
So we declared you victim this week.
Okay,
Is
you're
that
the
good?
boss. So it's good.
Boss.
You're the boss man. So
Oh man, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell my wife that.
that's right. You get paid the big dollars.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna interview you, Zach, and just kind of tell your story.
Okay.
And so I guess just natural for me to ask you some questions. And
You make it raw.
okay, man, let's make it raw.
Make it raw.
So let's just go way back. Just
Okay.
just kind of give us from the beginning. You don't have to tell us about how you came out of the canal or anything, but just tell about where you grew up and about your family dynamics.
Okay. I grew up in Ruston. I was born in Lafayette, Louisiana. My dad was Robert Yates, mom Cindy. I got an older brother, Rowdy, which is 4 years older than I am. I got a middle brother, Chad, 13 months older than I am. And then I have a sister that's 8 years younger than I am.
Oh wow.
Yep. I've actually got two of my brothers living here in Ruston now. I've got my sisters living in Bossier. I married my high school sweetheart, Heather. We've been together since I was 16 and she was 14.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So 9 years of dating. We finally got married. That's a story, a book, a movie.
We're gonna get to
A
there.
life-
We're gonna get there.
A lifetime story in itself. I have a son, Jackson, is 18, just graduated, finna start Louisiana Tech. I have a daughter, Bella, she's 15, turned 16 in October. Be a sophomore at Ruston High. Like I said, I spent most of my time here in Ruston, went to Ruston High School, played some sports, football, things like that. Wasn't necessarily the best student. I left a mark at Ruston High, but I wouldn't say it necessarily was.
Academics.
Yeah, honor roll, straight A's. No, no. More detention, things like that. Yeah, but went to Louisiana Tech for a little while. Realized they wanted you to go to class. They wanted you to just show up.
Yeah.
I had a hard time with that, so didn't really make it at Louisiana Tech very long. Had a friend of mine that was a barber, and he was a little bit older than I was, but he was my barber, and I would come in talking about not doing well in school and what that looked like, and he offered for me to be a barber, and I turned him down for a long time.
Yeah.
I was like, that doesn't interest me at all. But when Tech finally gave me the old boot, you
had to do
heave ho,
something.
had to do something,
Yeah.
and one person had offered me a job. So I was like, well, maybe I need to look into that. So
Yeah.
I met with the man in the picture over here, Dickie Thompson, who was like a mentor and a
And that's what it's
grandfather to
called,
me.
Dick Thompson's
It's-
Barbershop.
Yes, Thompson's Barbershop. It was named after his dad, and his two uncles started it in 1915.
Oh wow.
So we've been open for a little bit over 107 years.
That's cool.
Dickie worked here till he was 82, but he was like my mentor, and I met with him, and he told me what life looked like as a barber, and I said, well, I'll try anything. And
Yeah.
I went to barber school, and I got done with it. Ended up started cutting hair. Me and Heather got married, and been cutting hair for 25 years.
Yep.
In between there, I took a hiatus. I had the opportunity to open restaurants. That was always a passion and dream of mine, and actually is a part of who I am, and it didn't work out. And that was a very trying time
Sure.
in my life. Learned a lot about manhood and what failure looks like doing that. When you put your heart and soul to something and it doesn't work out. So that's a big part of my story. But so I had an opportunity to live out a dream and to shut that door on that dream.
Yeah.
So other than that,
What
man,
was your restaurant called?
Zach's Blend of the Bayou. It was a Cajun.
Zach's Blend of the Bayou.
Yeah, kind of threw my name on it, and I think that just killed it right there. But no, but we were really good. We were doing well, and Ruston at that time had no franchise restaurants. We didn't have Chili's, Outback, Applebee's, anything like that. And then we passed the liquor law in our town, and so when that passed, we got a movie theater, Chili's opened up, Applebee's, and with that influx of restaurants and people had never had franchise kind of atmosphere here in Ruston, it just ran havoc over all mom and pop restaurants. And me being a new kid on the block, it just didn't take
You were the first
long.
one on a chopping block.
It was, and it was a very mature decision to say, hey, I didn't get in this to go in debt and be in debt the rest of my life. So when we saw the writing on the walls that this wasn't going to be the first restaurant to come like Chili's, that we decided to go ahead and step back, kind of see what happens and see what the Lord had in store. And the restaurant business wasn't. I continued to cater I did catering for even when I was still cutting hair, and I actually worked at the children's home too. I had 3 jobs, so but money is a big part of my story. It's something we'll get into. It's probably, I wouldn't call it my vice, but it's probably the one thing that I would say has controlled me very heavily.
Decision making, or
I'm scared. I'm scared of not having money.
Sure.
I saw what it did in my childhood and with my family, and what my parents argued about probably the most was finances. And as a kid, that just stuck in my head. And my thing was, I'll work till my hands bleed, but I'm not going to be broke. I'm not going to argue about money. That will never be my problem. And
sure.
if I meant having 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, whatever it took to make $1, I was willing to do it. So at one point I was working 3 jobs as me and Heather first got married, and it was great financially, but as far as home life and what that meant when Jackson came around, it didn't play out very good. Didn't work.
Yeah.
No.
Well, going back to your childhood a little bit now, I've only known you, I guess, about 10 years now.
Yeah, you're only in Ruston because of me.
Yeah, you're right. That's
don't leave that out.
That's
a long story. But
yeah.
Justin is in Ruston because when we called him to the ministry,
is in Ruston.
I said, I got this guy. And I made a phone call, and I said, well, I think we need to bring him in for an interview. And that's how Justin got to be in Ruston, Louisiana. So I want to just throw that out there.
So that being said, he's to blame.
Yeah.
It's his fault.
Yeah. If y'all don't like what Justin's done in Ruston,
yeah, Zach's fault.
My fault.
So going back to your childhood a little bit, now, for what I understand, you was kind of the life of the party as a teenager.
I was. I grew up with 2 older brothers, and so to get attention, I had to do whatever it took to get that attention.
Yeah.
My older brother Rowdy was very, very athletic. All district football scholarships, things like that. Chad, my middle brother, who was the littlest of all 3 of us, but he was academically very gifted, straight A's, never made a B, Dean's Lit, all that kind of stuff. And then there was me. And I wasn't super athletic. I tried really hard. I wasn't super smart in school. I had some learning disabilities that held me back that nobody had identified. And so for me to get the attention, I tell this story, and I didn't know until my dad had passed, but that he didn't mean it rudely. But my dad didn't have a lot of friends. But one day, one of my dad's friends came over, a work colleague, and he was introducing us, and he said, "This is Rowdy. He's my athletic son. This is Chad. He's my smart son. And this is Zach. Well, he's just Zach." And I really felt like I didn't have an identity.
You didn't have
I didn't like, what's that mean? Like, I can't even be the funny guy. And so I used humor and being the life of the party. And then that kind of took me into, doing whatever it took to get my mind right, to be the funny guy, to be the guy that, hey, you want to have a good time, or you need something, or, you want to go get in a fight, whatever it was, call Zach. He'll be there. He's a part of whatever. And I kind of got that identity kind of going through high school.
So would you say that if somebody says, I bet you won't fill in the blank, you were going to do that?
Oh, I'd do it. No doubt. Yeah. No doubt. Like, I wouldn't like,
over the top.
Yeah, I'm not going to like eat a worm or,
swallow a goldfish.
No, I'm not that guy, but I was that guy that, if you want to party hard, stay out all night, get in trouble, I was down, and I would take the butt whooping that came with it, to be there with you as a friend. Friends meant a lot to me. Friends were very, very important. That was kind of my status. The more friends I could have, or closer friends I could have, especially young, I thought that validated me where I wasn't being validated other places. So I didn't know that.
You was networking when networking wasn't cool. Right?
Oh yeah. I was that guy that. I had social groups everywhere. Yeah. I wasn't just labeled with one. I wasn't just with the football players or what. I could go from the country guys to the football players to the band to to the geeks to whatever, and I was accepted everywhere. And I could, they call me like a chameleon. I could become whoever I needed to be. Yeah, blend in with any group and be accepted.
So a while back, you and I were kind of trading stories, and you told me a funny story, and I've got to ask you about it.
Okay.
So I don't know, one of your brothers, I think it was maybe Chad, worked at a clothing store or something like that, or maybe he had a girlfriend. Had a girlfriend who owned a family owned a clothing store or whatever. Yeah. So he got some nice threads, right?
Yeah. He had all of his wife. Even today was his girl. All me and my brothers dated and married our high school sweethearts. So we all were with our wives now for over 9 years.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah,
3 for 3.
Yeah, and my dad too. I mean, my dad married his high school sweetheart. My mom. I mean, so all of us, all the Yates men, we find one, we just stick with them. Chad just happened to find a rich one. That family had a department store in Ruston called Lewis's, and they had the Stag Shop, which was a guy's store, and so he had closets full of Tommy Hilfigers and all the latest clothes, and I didn't. And so
so one night apparently he would lock his closet.
Not only
if you correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
He would lock his closet, then you snuck in there and took the hinges off.
Yes.
And took a shirt off, a shirt out of his closet, and then y'all. Now you go ahead and tell the rest of the story because it's pretty funny.
So my brother Chad, since we were little, he didn't like to share things, nothing. So it didn't matter if my mom got a box of oatmeal cream pies, he'd take his number and he'd go hide them and hoard his things so you couldn't get to them. Didn't matter what toy.
It was all about surviving.
Man, when you got 3 brothers, I mean,
I had 2 brothers too.
Yeah. I mean, you had to hide it. And my sister didn't come on along until later, so she wasn't even really kind of involved in that. But so he had his own closet, and he put a padlock. Like, he just didn't lock it. He drilled a padlock and everything, and he thought we couldn't get in there. Well, I was going on some party or date that night, and Rowdy had a date, and we both needed new shirts, so we got a screwdriver and a hammer and popped hinges and took it down there, and we found brand new Tommy Hilfiger shirts with the tag still on them. We pull them off, take it on, we go. Didn't know he was going to the same party I was going to be at, and so we're at this party and I am getting in a fight with this guy, and he looks over and sees me finna get in a fight, and I'm thinking he's gonna come over and give me some brotherly advice, like, hey man, don't do that, you might get hurt, you might hurt him. No, he just walked over and said, hey, take my shirt off, you might get blood on it. So then I'm the guy, having to now I'm really invested in this fight. I gotta take my shirt off, and I'm standing like, come on, like I had to get madder to validate me taking my shirt off and acting like I'm really not that my brother's finna beat me.
Because you knew your brother's gonna beat the fool out of you.
Yeah, I'd be fighting this dude and my brother if I'd have messed up his shirt. So he's like, "You're gonna get blood on it. Take my shirt off. You shouldn't even have it on." So anyway, yeah, we lot of brother stories.
So you being the life of the party, and I mean, I know your reputation probably kind of preceded you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know your father-in-law pretty well.
Yeah.
How were you able to connect with Heather with being with her dad being in the mafia, and you being the kind of the life of the party in Ruston?
So we don't have 2 hours for this. This would be a 3-part miniseries if I had to break down that relationship. Heather, my wife, is an amazing person. She really is. She's beautiful. She's, just smart.
We both married up, by the way.
Oh, I'm not even married up. I mean, I'm like in a whole nother universe with my wife, and I've been told 1,000,001 times that I'm way above. She's way above my league, and you get tired of hearing that. And so anyway, so when me and Heather met, it was a part of my life that I had been arrested a few times, and actually her mom, the first time she saw me, I was at the police station. I had gotten a big fight, which they call it a gang fight, at Ruston High, and a kid had been pretty badly hurt, and my name got really involved in it, and we're on the news and the newspaper in Shreveport, Monroe, Ruston. We're all on front page of the newspaper.
Man, you made the news.
Oh man, like legit, like gang fight. Kid spends days in hospital, and it was pretty traumatic. Yeah. And anyway, so it took them about 2 weeks to figure out who was all involved, and then so we got called in and got told to go, or got taken to the police station, and the police station's right across from the post office back then. And Heather's mom was mailing a letter, and she sees me and getting out of the back seat of the car, handcuffed, and she goes, "Heather, isn't that little boy that you've been dating or seeing?" And he said, "Yeah, we're dating. I'm dating Zach." And she looks across, and she didn't know, she didn't know I was in handcuffs, being taken inside. So that was the first time her mom ever really kind of got a feel of who I really was. But I can remember that's kind of where my relationship with Christ really kicked in, and I prayed that God. I can remember the prayer. I said, "God, you have to give me somebody who can take the loyalty that I have to my friends and trump that." And she has to be so just out there that, like, because I was down. I was a ride or die kind of guy.
Yeah.
And so when Heather came in my life and we got, very close, I don't think Al, if you don't know my father-in-law, I don't even think his toughness could break what the Holy Spirit was trying to put together. And I think he tried. He tried really hard, and I gave him all the reasons in the world to run me off.
Yeah.
And I thanked him just not even long ago at the men's retreat that he was patient with me and that he didn't run me off. And that he gave a guy who I would not want to date my daughter, because without them and without their family and some of the things that they did for me, I don't know what I would be and where I would be right now. Because Heather, she was very loyal to her mom and dad and listened and respected their wishes. But her mom, I think, probably helped me out a lot, very much so. She could keep Al at bay. But for 9 years, me and Al didn't have a conversation.
Sure.
Like, for 9 years, our conversation was basically a head nod. And I was like, "Hey, Mr. Al, Mr. Flowers, how you doing?" And I'd get a head nod.
That's kind of like my daughter's boyfriend.
Yeah, you don't really get a whole lot out of him. And then when we did have that conversation 9 years later, we're at a wedding, and I'm in barber school, and he can kind of see what's coming ahead. And he tries to have that conversation with me and ask me about marriage and finances and what all that looked like. And we got back to Ruston, and I broke up with Heather because it had scared me so bad about, the real life. And then when he found that out, that he finally opened up and talked to me, and then I broke up with her, he wasn't very happy. And then when I did want to get engaged and to go have that, because me and Heather got back together, I had to go have that conversation, and that was a pretty hard conversation. But I love him now. We're great. We have a great relationship. We can talk. We can, he has accepted me for who I am. And
well, I hope so.
Him.
Y'all been married how long now?
20 years.
20 years. That's mine and my wife have been married 20 years.
Yeah, but, well, if you know Al, he could not like me for 20 years. I mean, to be honest, but I think he finds the value in who I've become and what I'm trying to become for his daughter and his side of the family.
Sure.
And I've got utmost respect for what he's done, and I allow him to be the hierarchy and the elder in our family, and I respect his opinion and stuff very, very, very highly, because as tough as he is, man, he loves hard.
Yeah.
If you're in his circle, you're in his circle.
Yeah.
So.
Well, all right. I'm fixing to ask you a personal question.
Okay.
And it's because we're talking about daddies.
That's right.
So.
Don't make me cry.
Now, your dad passed away in what year, Zach?
05.
05. Okay.
January of 05.
And what kind of relationship did you and your dad have before he passed away?
Man, well, if you go back to my childhood, man, my daddy he was my hero. Like, I didn't know, I guess when you're young, you don't know your dad's faults. You don't know his vices. You don't
Sure.
really see that. I just saw a hard-working man trying to scratch a living together for three knucklehead boys and a lovely life. And we didn't have a lot, but what we had, we loved. And man, he tried to give us what he could, and he was at things. And as we got older, I started seeing something wasn't right and all that. I didn't really know what was going on, and then I found out that he had a gambling addiction and that he had his own struggles and own things he was dealing with. But I mean, just to make a long story short, when he died, yes, we had a really good relationship, but it was a very honest. I knew everything that was going on,
Yeah.
and I didn't agree with it, and I think that might have made me think a little bit less of him in some ways. But the best thing that ever happened was my birthday is January 3rd, and he had called me to wish me a happy birthday, and his last words he ever said to me was, "Hey, I love you." And he died a few days later after
Wow.
that. And so I always said, outside everything, argument, fight, or anything we ever had, the last things he ever told me was he loved me, and I stand firm on that. That's something that I'll always remember. And so that was I don't know if those wasn't the last words that we had. I might have had some regrets not knowing where we stood, but to hear that, to me, validated everything that we ever went through. So,
Would you say? And I'm not trying to dig or
dig, brother. Get
well,
that
I'm
on
going
me.
to say I'm not trying to just reach.
Yeah.
But would you say some of your teenage acting out was a reflection of your view of your dad, or?
Yeah. After 3 boys, after you have 3 sons, about that third one, you're kind of tired of raising kids, and I really believe that my dad, at that point in his life, has sacrificed so much for his family that he was striving for something to validate himself. And so he was looking for something that would give him that high that men look for.
Is that like a midlife crisis, you would say? Or?
No, I wouldn't say it was a midlife crisis, because I think a midlife crisis is something that I don't know. I don't know. I've never talked to a guy who has ever identified, hey, I went through a midlife crisis, and most of them I went and bought a Corvette, or I went and got a motorcycle, or me and my wife traveled and I do this, and this. I think his was just a blown addiction, and he was looking for something that he never had. And when you're raising kids and you're working all the time, it's hard to find something for yourself to give you that adrenaline high.
Yeah.
And gambling was that for him. And I even participated in that gambling. I was a part of the manipulation and did it with him, sometimes unknowingly that I was going to go do that. And so I got to see him in his element, and it's no different than an alcoholic or a drug addict or anybody addicted to anything. I mean, it's a true sickness. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with winning money or losing money. It's all about just that moment that I could win. And so there was a time in my life I can remember that I actually I ran away or stayed out for 2 or 3 days, knowing that I was going to get in trouble, but at least he was going to have to talk to me. At least he was going to have to get on to me. And I didn't mind the whoopings or the groundings and all that, because it made me feel like he cared, because he was invested.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't in trouble, then I didn't feel like I was getting the attention I needed. And now you're talking to the center of attention, the guy who was, I kind of refer myself as the dancing chicken kind of guy. I would do whatever to get it. And then here's the guy I want the attention from, and he wasn't giving it to me. So I was going to get it. And I'm that guy. If I want your attention, I will get it any way possible.
Sure.
And if that means acting a plumb fool, then I'll act a plumb fool.
Yeah. So let's move on a little bit. You talked about, a relationship with Christ. So you, Heather, got married what year? I guess that would be, 2003.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. October, yeah.
Okay.
20 years ago. So.
And so you and Heather got married.
02, because it'll be 21 years in October.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
So y'all got married and settled down here in Ruston.
Mm-hmm.
Started. I guess how many years? I guess it won't be too long. Had Jackson.
Yeah. Jackson came around in 05. So 2.5 years of marriage. Then we got pregnant with Jackson.
So as far as marriage goes, was there any struggles that you and Heather went through where y'all came out of or been able to overcome? Or if there, I'm not saying if there, are there any struggles? We all
Yeah,
have our struggles.
Sure.
But how, I mean, was it? How hard was it? You know, to figure all those family dynamics.
This
and,
is really
and
funny.
bringing all those baggage in and all this kind of stuff.
It's really funny because I think it's so different if you put her in this chair, if you put me in this chair. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
You know, I'll sit there and we'll be in Sunday school or groups, and she's talking about all these bad times. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I was so absent. I had so many jobs. I was working, and so I'm thinking I'm killing it. Like, man, we're in a big nice house and driving nice vehicles and doing all these things, and I'm like, you know, this is great because that's how I measured marriage was financially.
Let's be honest though. That's kind of, I mean, that's kind of standard.
Yeah.
For here for Ruston,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Yeah, I can say that. Yeah.
And okay.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, I'm sorry.
But nobody knew. But I didn't know. I mean, I just thought, as long as we're not arguing about money, we got a great marriage, because that's the only thing I defined marriage for. You know, we did what married people do. You know, we had sex, was great, and you know, I mean, to be candid, that's why, you know. But that was all great.
Well, we call it raw talk.
Raw talk. So that was great, and we had great friends, and we did a lot of things together, and we liked each other. If I needed to get away, I had 1 of 3 jobs I could go be a part of to get out of the house. And I think that was probably the biggest thing for Heather, was she felt alone a lot of times. You know, at one point I had the restaurant. I could stay up there all the time. Or when I quit that, I had catering. I had the children's home. I tell a story. There was one time, you know, even at some point, if the house was too loud or I didn't want to be there, I had an on-call cell phone, and I would have my own cell phone. So I would use my cell phone to call my on-call cell phone and be like, oh, yeah, you need me at the children's home? Yeah, I'll be there in a minute, because I took care of all the crisis in the evenings. And so I could actually just talk my way out of the house, you know, if the kids were crying, or if there was too much, or if Heather was bothering me, I could get away. Yeah. So I didn't deal with my problems, so I didn't see the problems. And but if Heather was sitting here, I think she would talk about, she felt like she was raising the kid alone. I mean, when we go back and watch a lot of the family videos from Jackson's early childhood, like, I'm not there. I'm not in the videos. I'm like, well, why didn't y'all take pictures of me? And Heather's like, you were not at home. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that was probably our biggest problem. But other than that, man, we really enjoyed each other. But
so when did that dynamic change for you?
For me, okay, I tell people that I liked Heather when I got married. And they're like, what's that mean? I'm like, well, I liked her. Like, she was awesome. But I wouldn't say I really found out I loved my wife until after I did a Bible study called Men's Fraternity by Robert Lewis. And I went through it with, like, our friends Brandon Ramsey, Jeremy McGee, Jeremy Telford. You know, there's 5 or 6 of us that went through it. And it started talking about wounds. Your daddy wounds, you know, and there's one absent the overbearing mother wound, but anyway, it's just talking about these wounds, and man, it's raw. It takes a year to go through it, once a week or once a month for a year, and man, it's gut wrenching, especially if you have, you know, because everybody has some kind of wound. Sure. And I started identifying some of these things from my dad, and man, it got me down to a place I didn't know I could be. And then you're supposed to go talk to your dad about it. And so here I am, I'm geared up to go talk to my dad about why he disciplined him the way he did, why did he treat my mom the way he did, why did he gamble, why did he need that, you know, why wasn't I enough, why wasn't my brothers enough, you know, why wasn't family enough to you know, do all this, and to fulfill him. And the week I was supposed to talk to him was the week he died. And so that's the moment, like, that was hard. Now I went from being a son to not having a dad, and then 2 weeks later Jackson was born. So now I'm a dad, and I don't have a mentor. I don't have that father to mentor anymore. And now I'm struggling with how I'm programmed and who I am. And I didn't know how to fix it, or the why, or why he was the way he was. And so, there was a lot of stuff going on in my head, and I couldn't enjoy my son. Like, I didn't want to hold Jackson. I didn't want to, me and Heather started, that was a separation time between us, and I really had to do some soul searching. And the second part of men's fraternity is that you start accepting that, the healing process is that Jesus is your example. And I started really looking at that and looking at the way what example he set, even though, Jesus didn't have kids, but how he loved the church and the forgiveness and all the things that come with that. And I started giving a lot of forgiveness and all that. And I made a decision that day, and we kind of talked about it in our opening, that, like we said, you can either follow Adam or you can follow Christ. Adam being your dad, or, the example Christ set. And that day I locked it down, and I said, I'm going to follow Christ. And he's going to teach me how to be a dad. He's going to teach me how to be a friend. He's going to teach me how to be a business owner or whatever. And everything's going to be laid at his feet and by his example. And I had to reprogram some of the stuff my dad had taught me, and that was really hard.
Sure.
And I had to go talk to my uncle and find out why my dad was the way he was, and hear more stories about my grandfather that I knew, but I didn't know what he was like when my dad was a kid and what his dad was like. And so I had to break that chain, and it really made sense after I got a lot more information of who the Yateses were and how they were, that I wasn't going to do it the way my dad did. And I'm going to be a better husband. And even at that moment, like Heather and the women the wives of the guys in that, they were calling each other like they're different, like they're talking different and they're doing different. And it just has continued. And that was probably, 2006 maybe, somewhere in there. And I think it still holds true today, man. I still hold my feet to the fire of that decision.
So would you feel like that's the pivotal moment where your relationship with Christ kind of came to a head, or you start taking it seriously?
Yeah, no doubt, especially in my marriage. Now, I think probably where it really took a strong direction is at one point one summer I left and I went out to a Camp Choye out in Texas. And I learned that I was.
How you spell that? I'm just joking.
CHO-EA, Choye. But I remember standing in the parking lot of Choye and realizing how fake of a guy I really was. I remember hollering at God and me and him having a really hard conversation, and I was just so tired of being fake. I was a great Christian on Wednesday night and Sunday mornings, but Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays, and every day but Wednesday and Sundays, I was being who I wanted to be.
Yeah.
But everybody thought I was this great dude, and I felt so fake. And even at that camp at the time, what we were going through, it was like the week before the kids come, and I think that was probably the most raw I've been with God ever. And I think that was probably the pivotal point of me really accepting Christ. And then I think rebooting who I was as a man was probably when my dad died, because I didn't know how to be a dad, and I didn't really know Christ could set that example because I didn't see him as a dad, but I didn't understand the relationship between Jesus and the church and all that represents. I mean, the depth of that. And so once I started researching and studying and learning more about that, it all started playing out, how to discipline people, how to talk to my wife, how to love my wife. Didn't know it talked about sex so much in the Bible and what that was supposed to look like. And, so there were so many things I didn't know, but once I accepted it and started to dive into it, man, it made sense. I was like, oh, okay, if you created sex, if you created marriage, you created all these things, and you ought to know what I should be doing. So I changed a lot.
Well, that's a good point, because that's one thing I've been giving a lot of attention to, is like Christ setting the example of masculinity.
Oh yes. And
knowing that, like you said, there's so much, in Scripture that gives us direction and gives us the example of who we should be like as men. And so it's not always left up to our earthly dads or our whoever, baseball coaches or whoever that is. And those are great and can be very influential, but it don't necessarily have to be. And
Yeah, and that's what I had done most of my life, is taken all those men and wrapped them up into one package. You know, I wanted to be, you know, my football coach. I wanted to be Rambo. I wanted to be, you know, Rocky. I wanted to be, you know, all these Ric Flair, all these guys that I thought were men. And,
You're going way back, man.
I'll woo you, baby.
Whoa.
But it's one of those things. I took all those guys, and that's who I become, and then realized if you looked at them all, I mean, at some point they all failed. And I didn't want to fail anymore. And so I was like, who's the one dude that didn't fail? And that was Christ.
Yeah.
And so to accept his teachings and apply them, and I'm not saying I hadn't made all my mistakes and I hadn't done a lot of things wrong, but the things that I really have fallen him in and really set that standard, man, it's probably the things that I succeed in life at.
Yeah.
You know, the things that I take him out of and try to do on my own is they probably or usually don't work out. You know?
I think one good point that comes out of your idea there is that as men, as leaders, and if we have influence or any kind of leadership over your household or community or whatever that may look like, one of our main objectives should be to point them to Christ.
Oh, yeah.
And because we are going to fail. Like I've had
yeah.
those men in my life where they've let me down, you know, and I just feel like, man, I put so much faith and trust in, you know, this person, you know, wanting to be like them and everything, and they did something or you know, whatever. But if we're pointing them to Christ, then we know Christ is not going to let them down.
Yeah.
You know, and but we can just reflect that, you know, that leadership to him.
Well, that's one thing with Jackson and Bella. Bella's my daughter. But I've always said it's not about me. If I'm disciplining you, if I'm doing whatever, I'm doing it because this is what Christ told me to do.
Yeah.
And I've always directed them. Even today, like, you know, Jackson trying to figure out what he wants to do in life. I mean, he's going to college, and I'm like, I can help you figure out what you're good at, but you need to be praying and figuring out what Christ wants you to do. And I always direct them back to them, because if he fails, I don't want it to be on my shoulders.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, man, you won't fail if you're picking up trash, or if you're, you know, doing whatever you do in life, no matter if you're the president or the trash man. If that's where God wants you, then you're succeeding. And it's not on my expectations. I have no expectations of you except for you to love Christ and to do what Christ wants you to do. And raising him in that, man, I think it's taken a lot of weight off my shoulders of I've got to do this and make sure he doesn't fail. Right. You know, and I think a lot of men feel that way. They feel like if they don't do or say or put kids in a position to succeed, then they fail. And my thing is that it ain't on me. I'll take all. I gave that to Jesus. I can remember Jackson laying in his crib, and man, I used to go there and lay my hands on him and pray over him and just be like, God, he's yours. He's not mine. You just direct me in what you want him to do, and hopefully I can interpret that and instill that in him. And I did that from day one. I mean, even when he was in the womb, I mean, we were praying over him, and that was my prayer. And so I took a lot of the burden off me, and I gave it to Christ. You know, just like we should everything. And I think if you knew my kids and where their success comes from, it doesn't come from me. You know, it comes from their relationship with Christ and how they follow Christ and
Sure. the
love that they show. I mean, I do believe I got remarkable kids that make a lot of mistakes. Don't get me wrong, they do. But man, their direction is not pointed by me at all. I won't take credit in that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, going back to money.
Okay.
You said money is your biggest vice.
Biggest vice, yeah.
So how has that affected you negatively? I mean, you shared a little bit about that, but as far as where you are now, you know, how were you able to recognize that, and how were you able to combat that?
So I think it was one was when I had my restaurant and I had to close it down. And that.
Let me ask you this. Stop you right
Okay.
there. Interject. Do you regret that?
Regret what part?
Opening the restaurant?
No, I don't regret. I learned what a want was when I did that. I never understood. I always thought good things was God open up the door. If a guy calls you and says, "Hey man, I heard you're a pretty good restaurant guy, good manager. I'm gonna give you ever how much money you need to open up a restaurant, and I'm gonna back you, and let's get this thing done." Well, that's got to be God, right? Like Satan's not gonna send me $100,000 and a man with unlimited resources that owns a restaurant building with all the restaurant equipment and all the stuff I need. Well, that's got to be God.
Yeah.
And so I took it and ran with it. And then when it closed and I was on my knees crying because I'd lost all this man's money and everything. And I can just remember, and I went into Heather, and I can remember saying I failed. And I went in there and I was just praying. And God said, "When did I ever tell you to open a restaurant? That was what you wanted to do. You made it happen. You beat down doors to do it. But I never once told you to do that." And as I processed that, he didn't. I don't really ever think God was like, "Hey."
Is that something you prayed about?
No, I wanted it.
No, you wanted
I just wanted it. And when I thought I didn't have to pray, I just thought he delivered it. I just thought he was, there's no way this man's going to call me up on the phone out of the blue and just because he heard that I was good at what I was doing, because I was running restaurants at night when I started cutting hair too.
Yeah.
And had heard about me, and he was friends with Al, and they had talked and offered me this opportunity. So I was like, man, he knows my heart, because I had an opportunity to buy a restaurant and it fell through. So I was like, well, God knows my heart, and he's delivering these things. I don't even have to pray about it. God's just dropping blessings down.
Sure.
And so I just did it. And when it was all over, said and done, that's not where God wanted me. And I can see some of the things starting to manifest in my marriage and relationship that was going to be really hard. There was a bar in there. There was a lot of women in there. There was, a lot of things, that was going possibly that happens in the restaurant world that could have happened to me. I could have fell into that trap. And then not to say that for the last 5 months of me having that restaurant, I didn't pull a paycheck. We were just eating what was in the leftover at the end of the night. And so, I just knew, I know now that's not where God wanted me, but I created it.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't take that lesson back for anything. That was a good lesson for me, that you can create what you want and not be blessed by God. So
going back to the money question.
Okay.
So that's when you recognized it.
That's right.
In the restaurant.
So how did I come to deal with it or how God really showed me that he's in control, and where I realized that money comes and goes. I was cutting hair Tuesdays through Friday, 8 to 5, Saturdays 8 to 2. I was catering Friday and Saturday nights, at least 3 gigs a month. And then I was working at the Methodist Children's Home Monday through Thursday from 5 o'clock to 8 in the morning on call. And so between all that, we were making a really good living. Like we were, not that we were stacking just a lot of money back, but we were able to put pretty good bit back and have a big house and nice cars and all that. But I was never home. And Heather called me one day and she said, "Zach, I need you." And I said, "What do you mean you need me? I'm here." She goes, "No, I need you, and Jackson needs a dad." It was about the time you start playing T-ball. So 4 or 5 years old is how old Jackson was. And she goes, "Jackson needs a dad." And I said, "Well, I am his dad. I'm there. I'm providing." And she was like, "No, he needs a baseball coach. He needs somebody outside playing pitch with him. She needs somebody to put him to bed. You're never here." And I said, "Okay." And I was, had gone through the men's fraternity thing, and if that's what my family needed, I was going to do it. And so she said, "You need to pick one job, and that's what you need to do. You got to quit 2 of your 3. And I said, "Fine, I'll be a barber." And so I called Children's Home and resigned, and I sold every piece of restaurant equipment, catering equipment I had, and that was going to be $50,000 or $60,000 in 1 week gone, just no more, out of the budget. And so I believe that 2 things in the world to be true. That's mathematics and the Bible. So I believe that if I owe $6,000 in bill a month and I just cut out, $3,000 that ain't coming, then we're going to be in the red. And so here comes the first month. We do Dave Ramsey. We pay all our bills at the beginning of the month. So here comes time to pay bills, and I'm just sitting there like, I'm finna show you, lady. Finna show you what me not having those two jobs look like. Some of this got to go. We got to get rid of cars and houses and downsize and go live in a trailer down by the river.
Down by the river.
Yeah, with Chris Farley in the van by Chris Farley as our neighbor. But you're finna learn what this looks like, me being at home. And we did all our bills, and we zeroed out. And everything matched. And the next month, we did the same thing, and we never went in the red. There was always enough money, and I never understood that. I couldn't even, like, the math didn't even make sense. But checks would show up in the mail. Something I would do for the church, I would get a little check in the mail, or this old catering job that somebody didn't pay me for showed up, and then it was just, but things were just coming, and I said, okay, God, you I understand. And then the barbershop was here, and then before I know it, it went here and here and here, and just within a few years, I was making just as much money cutting hair than I did in all three of my jobs. And so, God just provided that. And then not even going to talk about the tithing aspect. When we started really tithing and what that looked like, I was just like, well, we're going to give this away, then we're really not going to make it. And then, man, the barbershop went from here, and it jumped, and now I'm making more money than I made in all that, and still tithing to church and doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that showed me that God was in control of my money, and that it wasn't mine. And there was a lot of things that had happened in that time. Like, I got robbed. Every dollar I had got stolen from my house, and that's a story in itself. And I was mad, and there's my money. I'm broke again. And I know who did it, and I know how to go to his house and go get my money back. And I was heading that way with a gun, and God pulled me over, and he just said, why are you still worried about money? It's not yours. It's mine. He goes, it's my money. I gave it to you, and I'm going to give it back. Just handle this the way I tell you to handle it. And I was right in O'Neill's parking lot, O'Neill's feed, and I remember turning around and going home, and I tried to get my money back, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I just didn't go walking up in a guy's house with a gun. I went through it the right way and never got my money back. But the money was, it was just, God just poured and poured and poured, and that money showed back up so quick. It took me longer to make it the first time, but the second time it was just coming in faster than I could count it. And that was just a God thing. So God he just eased my mind and my burden about money. That, not saying I still have those itches and those twitches and everything that comes to do with it, but God just always settles my soul. And when it gets right down to it, somehow I always make it. It always looks better than I can think it would. I'd get all worked up about it, but. So that's probably the moment that I made money not my God anymore, So that he taught me a great lesson in all that.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's a good story.
Mm-hmm.
So, Raw Talk Podcast. Why is your passion, to tell your story and to be able to relate to men? And with your story, and to be able to make a difference.
So I've tried to get out of barbering a lot of times. I tried to get your job. I even was going to be the college minister before you came. And I went and met with Chris, our pastor, and we talked about it. And he told me, he says, Zach, you've got a church bigger than our church, and they come sit with you one-on-one every day in your chair. You have such a great men's ministry. And as many times I've tried to leave and get something maybe more glamorous or more exciting, I always end up behind that chair. And I get to talk to a lot of guys, and I hear a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And, some of them are good and they're funny, but a lot of them are sad, man. They're just sad. And I see the looks on these guys' faces, and, man, my heart just bleeds for them. And so as I look at men, and I'm excited about life, y'all. I am.
I can say that about you. I've known you long enough to know,
I get excited. Yeah. I do. I have fun. I ain't gonna lie to you. And it doesn't matter where we're at or what we're doing. I'm gonna have a good time at it. And I realize that life's too short not to. My dad died at 52, and I can't say he had a bunch of fun. And I said, I'm not gonna live a life that's not fun.
Yeah.
And so I am very passionate about talking to guys and helping them get those vices that they're struggling with. And then sometimes it's addiction, and sometimes it's just a mindset. Sometimes it's hard conversations they got to have, and just really pulling them outside of their comfort zone. And, you know, they're just, oh, that's not who I am. Yes, you are. I'm just, God created you in his image, so
Sure.
you have all the possibilities in the world. Quit limiting yourself to whoever made you think that. If it's your dad, your mom, your siblings, whoever put you in this box, you have no box. You're created by God in his image. You have no, quit saying that. And once they realize that, they break free, and they realize their potential is limitless. And man, they can make a difference in so many. And then the second reason is I know that one day I'm gonna be held accountable. I think that's the second thing. Is I've been asked to talk at a lot of places maybe that was uncomfortable for me, or to give my testimony or whatever. And I never say no. I've never said no since then. And people always say, well, you don't have to do that. And I say, yeah, I do. And they say, why? And I was like, because I have the knowledge to pass on. And if I'm not passing on the knowledge, then what am I doing? And I don't ever want God to say, hey, I sent you this place. Why didn't you go? And I don't know what that's going to look like one day when I stand in the day of my judgment. But I want God to say, hey, you know, I opened up the doors and you walked through. I appreciate that, my son, you know. So that's huge to me.
Well, and that's funny because I've been giving a lot of thought about stewardship. You know, I'm not talking about just in regards to money. I'm just talking about life overall.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think the Bible talks a lot about stewardship. And so to me, it just kind of makes sense if you put life in the compartment of being stewards instead of, you know, just living life, but that we are going to be held accountable to how we steward what God entrusted us with.
Mm-hmm.
And so not saying I've always got that right, or you know, I'm still, you know, I'm 44 years old, 43, be 44 here shortly. You're trying to figure the stewardship out.
Yeah.
And so, all right. So one last question,
Okay.
and we'll wrap this puppy up.
Okay.
So you had a Hilfiger shirt on that night that you stole from Chad.
Okay.
What kind of breeches you had on?
Well, I wish I could say I had on them Jabos, but I didn't have on a That's an inside joke with me and Justin, because, you know, Jabos were the thing, but I didn't own a pair
that
of
little
Jabos.
white tag, baby.
I'd fake it. I'd put white out on the zipper so everybody thought I had on Jabos till you got close and you realized it was fake.
They were just rustlers.
Yeah, them old Levi's from you know, the old school Levi's, them hard britches, you know. But yeah, they wasn't no Jabos or Guess or Z Cavaricis. I had a Tommy Hilfiger, Levi's, and probably some Easton shoes.
Some Eastons.
Some Easton leather shoes. You know.
I always liked those and Timberlands.
Oh yeah, I love Timberlands. Couldn't afford them, but Eastons were a little bit cheaper. My parents would let me have a pair of those. So, yeah.
Well, cool. Well, hey, we thank you for piping in. Hey, Zach, thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I think that just kind of sets the tone for what we want this podcast to be about.
That's right.
And we want the story, but we also just want to share that just so people can take something away and realize that they're not alone, you know, and then they can move beyond themselves.
Sure. And I think the biggest thing I realize is the end of my story is not my story. The beginning of my story is my story. And a lot of us wait till the big impact or the big things, man. I wished I could go back to my childhood or my teenage years before I got into all that trouble and became that guy and just asked my daddy, hey, why can't we talk? Why aren't you loving me the way I need to be loved?
Yeah.
I need this from you, Dad. And I wish I would have said that, and I'll cry right now if I think about it too long. And I think if you could say what was my regrets, it's not my marriage, it's not my kids, it's not the relationships I have in my church, it's that I never got to be raw with my dad. And I never got to find out why he was, and he created me to be who I am. And that's probably my biggest regret, is not starting from the beginning, so I didn't have to go through that long road of hardship to learn what I learned, and I think I could have learned it in a few few hard conversations with my dad would have made up for a lot of the acting out that I did to get the attention that attention-seeking kids gonna want. I could have got it with some hard conversations, but I didn't know I was allowed to talk like that to my dad. I didn't know that I could ask those questions and that I deserved a response. And if somebody would have told me that, I think I was ballsy enough as a kid to walk in there and ask him, but nobody told me I could do that. So I wish if we end this with one thought of what would I do different is that I would have gone, if I could go back in time, I would go back and have that hard conversation with my dad. And I think that would have paid dividends in my life today. Yeah. So if you're out there and you're thinking, you know, your relationship with your dad or whatever, man, pick up the phone, make that phone call them, say, hey, I need to have a conversation, have that conversation with them, find out the why they are who they are, what they struggled with, you know, how their dad raised them. It gives you a lot of empathy for your parents, and I think that's what it would have done for me, for my dad. It would have gave me a lot of empathy instead of a lot of resentment, because my dad, his childhood wasn't easy either, and what he did for me and my family at his very young, he had three kids before he was 24. Wow. And so the things that he sacrificed and gave up, I didn't know about. Nobody ever told me that. Yeah. And I think I would have had a lot more empathy for him and not put him through so much to pay him back for not doing the things I thought he should be doing. So if you're out there and you have kids and you haven't had that conversation and maybe tell them where you're coming from like I'm doing now, sit your kid down, let them know, man. Let them know about your past, and don't be embarrassed of it. Own it. Just own it. Just be honest and raw.
I got you.
So,
well, good deal. We thank you for piping in. And one guy we want to give a shout out to is our guy running our sound and our cameras, Jay Woods. He's been with us since we started this thing, and so he's helped us out. So we thank you, Jay.
There you go.
And so we just
behind the scenes.
Join us next week, Raw Talk.
There you go.